Hey everybody, welcome to Actively Family. In this video, we are going to show you how we built this beautiful, long-lasting steel barn out of a VersaTube kit. Before we get started, let me give you a little tour of our barn. So right here behind me, we have a big storage area. We're going to use this to store hay, create a little workshop, and also an area that we can use for cleaning up vegetables and processing any meat that we might get. So we have two doors in the shed area. This one is going to head out to the chicken run area, and this door heads out to our garden area. On this side of the barn, we have two windows adding light to our shed. And then back here in the back, we have 3 stalls. This is gonna be our chicken coop, this is gonna be for our pigs, and this is gonna be for our livestock. There is a door going into each of the stalls. This again is our chicken area right here. If you go through it, you'll see that each of the stalls also have a separate door going back into this run area that is shaded by this 10-foot overhang. In total, the barn is 55 feet long from end to end. The structure is 16 feet wide. Each of the stalls here are 10 feet wide, and the storage shed area right here is 25 feet long. This overhang shade area here behind me also runs the length of the barn, and it is 10 feet wide. I'm really happy with how it all came together. One thing to point out before I show you how we put this building together is just to note that we had no experience whatsoever with construction before we built this barn. I also want to add here that I did not build this building all by myself, and you shouldn't try to do it all by yourself either. I had a lot of help from family and friends. None of them had any construction experience either, but with a little help, this DIY project is definitely doable, even for newbies like us. If we could do this with zero construction experience whatsoever, you can do it too. Okay, I have my family here, and we are gonna have a barn raising. We're laying out the trusses now. We have little stakes pounded in the ground so we can put it in place and know that they'll all be the same alignment. And we're gonna go put this thing up. Okay, we got all the trusses put together and set in place. It was super easy. They literally just slide together. They fit together like Legos. Now we're gonna put together the divider walls in our shed. When you're putting in the divider wall, what we did is we are putting the first bracket at 50 inches high because that is the standard height of a cattle panel, and we're gonna line this with cattle panels. So we want the top of the cattle panel being at the top of this bar so we can attach it really easily. So with our little barn raising party, I was able to get the building all framed up. One thing we did to get ready for our barn raising is anchor down the rails to the concrete slab. Okay, now we are anchoring our barn to the concrete, and this is how you do it. First, you get a hammer drill and you drill your hole. We drilled our hole with the railing bar on top. Then we blew out all the dust with a leaf blower. Okay. So this end goes down, you got your washer and then your screw on top, and it's flush here so you're not damaging the anchor screw when you pound this in. You'll feel when you hit the bottom of your drill, and then give it a couple really hard whacks to make sure the end of that flares out to hold it in place. Our barn raising party is over. Now the next step is we turn to putting in our windows and our doors. For the windows, keep in mind that you have the frame, and then there's this little channel that goes around the frame. Then the window gets inserted into the frame. We're gonna seal this with some silicone to help the water not leak in. And then you have your hat channels right here that are gonna connect to the edge because this little bar is not as wide as the framing inside the barn. Now for the door, we went ahead and did a commercial steel door. Most people probably put in a wood door, but I watched Handyman and he put wood doors in his VersaTube building, and at the end of it he said, you know, I wish I had put in commercial doors. So we went ahead and did commercial doors, and I'm really happy that it did. It turned out really nice and it's really structurally sound, and it's gonna last forever. One thing to note here is I did not install the doors and the garage door by myself. I hired a professional to come do this. This was especially handy for the garage door, which weighed a ton. They had a special machine to lift it up. They put it in perfectly, and I'm glad I opted to pay the $300 to have them put in the garage door for me. No doubt that you're smarter than me, but just so you don't make the same mistake I did, when I was anchoring down the frame to the concrete, I just filled in every single slot that they had pre-drilled without thinking about the pre-drilled hole that was right in the middle of our doorway. For this doorway, you're gonna cut out the metal frame that is blocking the doorway, and we had to remove the anchor that was there. So do not put an anchor right in the middle of your doorway. We ended up just drilling our own holes right next to the doorway and getting it anchored in on both sides of the doorway for stability. Anyway, I'm really happy how the doors and the windows turned out. The next step is you're gonna want to install these purlins and hat channels. You're gonna use the purlins and hat channels to give the building extra strength and integrity, and also to attach your sheet metal to. You can see that the purlins and hat channels go all the way up the side and on top of the building. And for this, it's really helpful to have little clamps to clamp the purlin to the side when you're up here, and also to have a level to make sure your channel line is straight going across the building. When you are putting the purlins on the buildings, make sure that these beams are perfectly straight and at 90-degree angles. We did not measure that on all of the beams, and that created some trouble with us on the roof. So our roof line here ended up being a little bit jagged to make up for that mistake. You can avoid that mistake while you're putting up your purlins. Just make sure each of these walls are at a 90-degree angle. Now with the doors, windows, and purlins all in place, we are putting up the trim, and this gives it such a nice finished look. So when you are attaching the J-trim, make sure you are using a pancake screw with the flat end on it. I found that it helps to put in a pilot hole to get the screw to attach, and also make sure that when you are putting the screw in, you are not drilling on top of another screw. That obviously would make it impossible to get the screw in. So here we go. Just like that. For this top piece, you're gonna wanna cut a little inch slit on both sides of this J-trim that you can fold down and stick on top. That will help the water, when it's flowing, to flow out instead of inside your window frame. Now you're gonna get with these edges, you're just gonna slip it on either side of the siding, and it will fit perfect, just like that, and we'll get it screwed in just like the other one. So the garage trim is just like the window and door trim. You have the J trim going all the way around, except you have this little L trim right here, and then you screw the J trim directly into the L trim, and it looks nice and clean like this. Now you are ready to install your sheet metal. This is the fun part where it really starts coming together. The sheet metal is cut to the exact length that you will need to have it fit perfectly. But the hard part is where you are going to need to trim the sheet metal to go around the doors or the windows. At first, we tried doing this with a Sawzall. You can see that was a failed experiment. It was not very reliable. We also tried the tin snips. It is doable with tin snips, but it would have taken forever. So what we opted to do instead was to use an angle grinder with a diamond blade. It worked really well. Make sure you know what you're doing though, and wear safety equipment, because an angle grinder can kick back and cut you. there. Okay. You got a marker? We're putting up the siding now. A few things that we learned. One thing is make sure when you are putting in your screws that you measure it. The way we did it is we held up a level and put a dot where each screw goes. When we didn't do this, sometimes we miss the hat channel and now we have a hole in our siding. So make sure you use something to make sure you are tapping right into that hat channel. Another thing that we learned was to make sure you sweep out this ledging. You can see right here we didn't sweep it out good enough, so this siding is not sitting flush. So we learned our lesson there. Make sure you sweep it out. Where this really started looking like a barn for me is when we installed the half panels for the back half of our barn. And these ones were not obviously pre-cut to size. We had to pick the size that we wanted and cut them halfway. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we used a 16-foot width for the building. That was not an accident. The Delmar panels that we put in here are 16 feet wide. It made it much easier having the building width to the length of the panels that we were installing. Because you're cutting this sheet metal in half, it's going to be pretty jagged and sharp right here on the ends. So what we did is, this is the J trim that would normally go around the door, but because we're not having to trim the door all the way up, we had extra J trim. And so we put that J trim right here over the top of it, and it gives it a nice clean look, and it also makes it so you won't be cutting your finger with that sharp sheet metal. We also had a fencing company come in and install gates on each of the stalls. We also had them install Delmar paneling to divide each of the stalls, and we had them take the Delmar paneling all the way up. There's one more modification that we made to this barn. Right here is the overhang edge, and you can see right here there's this little piece that connects because the sheet metal is going over the top right here and the purlin is connecting right here. But because this side of the building was designed to have sheet metal going all the way up, it doesn't have that little corner piece. So what you can do is just order those little corner pieces separately online. And so I ordered them separately online and put them all across this area that would be open, and then it wouldn't have sheet metal attached to it. So to make this look like a barn, make sure you order those little pieces to go on the parts that are open, and then just cut these panels in half to height, preferably to the height of the paneling that you'll be using on the inside, and then just use the J trim to trim over the top of that to make it look really sharp. Don't make the mistake that I did. I measured from the floor to the top of the panel for the J trim, but I forgot about the little lip right there, so that made a little opening. So I just trimmed a little piece of this J trim to slip in there, but it definitely would have looked better had I measured from the bottom of the ledge all the way up to the top. Once you have all the siding in place, then you're gonna come back through and put on this Eave trim. There's also trim to go the length of the building. That serves two purposes. One, it looks really polished and clean. And next, it helps keep the water out and helps the building to stay more insulated. Right now we are putting on the Eave trim. We're doing it on the side with the overhang. The first step is to put this little foam enclosure right here on the edge, and then we're going to put the Eave trim on top of it. Make sure when you do it, you leave a little space here at the top because you want it to be flush with that hat channel on top. You can see that we have a board running across right here. That's just to make sure that this right here is flush with the hat channel. Last but not least, we put on the roof, and that came together really quickly. So for putting up the roof, we found it's just helpful to have one person down, pushing it up, one person on the ladder, sliding it up. Then I'm gonna get in on a ladder on the inside and make sure it's square on the top. And then my brother here is working on the bottom to make sure it's square on the bottom. Then I'll secure it up at the top and he'll secure it at the bottom. Then we'll put in the rest of the screws. All you need to do is drill the nuts in each of the Purlins. And for this, we found this little contraption is actually very helpful. Just put something heavy to hold on a string, and then we put it in a glove so it wouldn't scratch up the tin. And then we have this measured off the last nut, and then we are going to put this nut right here in the center. And then with that nut in place, we can just use that to draw a line and put it right there. Move the string out of the way so it doesn't get caught in your drill. So one mistake that we made is I was trying to rush to get this roof on. So what I did is I put the top piece on, and then I just put 2 on the side, and then I was gonna come back and do it. And the problem with that was there arose a storm in the middle of the night before I had the middle pieces secure. Right now we are having a monsoon, and it was pretty crazy out there with the roof flapping and it not being tied down. So you definitely want to screw them into place just as soon as you get them into place. Don't chance it to the weather, as we are learning right now with this monsoon storm behind me here. So we had to run out and put this sheet metal under some pallets because the sheet metal started flying, but fortunately it looks like the storm has died down and everything is gonna be all right. Miss Kate here said a prayer for us, and the storm calmed down a little bit. We have all the roof panels installed, and now we are on the home stretch. So all we have to do is put in the last few pieces of trim. This morning we are putting on the Eave trim right here, and then we're just gonna put on the middle piece for the roof, and we will have this all done. We got it done. Our barn is done. This guy lives about 3 hours away from me. This is my dad, and he has been coming up here basically every weekend to help me get this barn finished. So this was a fun father and son project, but we are so happy with how this came together. Thank you, Dad, for all your help. Couldn't have done it without you, but we are so excited to have this barn put together. Well, there you have it. That is how we built our barn from a VersaTube kit. I'm gonna be honest with you, it was a ton of work. It took us several months to put together, but it was definitely doable, and I am so glad that we did. It was so empowering to build this barn with our own 2 hands. We made a lot of mistakes along the way, so definitely follow the instructions over anything you saw here, but it was just so much fun to have this learning experience. And I'm glad that there is a kit option out there that allows newbies like us to do something like this ourselves. Well, I hope this video was helpful. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.